Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to het Nieuwe Instituut. Welcome to Thursday Night Live, and welcome to this program, How to Do a Zoöp. Great that you're all here. My name is Klaas Kuitenbrouwer. I'm don't have to look that up actually. I'm researcher at het Nieuwe Instituut. Already over 2 years ago, I initiated the Zoöp project together with some people who are actually here that you will see on screen, which was about the design of a new legal entity in the face of the, well, as I don't have to explain to anybody, extremely urgent issues that have to do with climate change and the loss of biodiversity and the loss of ecological, modes of existence, basically. So tonight we want to present to you the ins and outs of the Zoöp project. And this evening also works as a kickoff to the zoonomic curriculum that actually starts tomorrow. And this is the kind of course we developed for people that will want to start a Zoöp. And that gives them a training into the basic movements of how to do this. But tonight is kind of the public opening of this event that starts tomorrow. Actually, that event will start at another protozoop, one that's not present tonight. Tonight, we have 4 protozoops presenting. So protozoops are organizations that have committed themselves to becoming a zoop at some point when both the zoop model is, actually the model is ready, but also the documentation needs to be finished. And the organization in case is ready to make this move. So protozoops are committed to becoming zoops, but are already practicing key elements of the idea of the Zoöp. So this is what we talk about tonight. 4 projects will present their own projects and different dimensions that are relevant to the Zoöp as a whole. But first, I'll give a short introduction to what is actually the Zoöp. And then I'll introduce to you in order of appearance the 4 different speakers. And after that, we'll have a chance to talk about the potential of the Zoöp project into facing the issues that we are all facing. And then we have a kind of a conversation that moves from the general approaches down to the very practical and the nitty-gritty of planning, numbers, and extremely detailed issues that you might face when you actually are committed to doing a Zoöp. So I'm going to share my screen now, making sure that I can do this, and I'll give you a maximum 7-minute presentation of what is a Zoöp. I've never done it as quickly as this. I tend to speak fast. So, oops, can you see me? I can't see my own screen, here we are. Yeah. Yes, is my screen, okay, so how to do a Zoöp. Zoöp is a new organizational form, a new legal entity that is, in general terms, an attempt to make a new beginning, a beginning with the work of repairing. It's a devastating and overwhelming task and even idea to try to save the world. So this is not what we're about. This is about to do the repair, the work of repair at your own situation, at your own here and now. It's an attempt, and Zoöp is an attempt to create a space, a certain alternative logic that lives inside that of the capitalist economy, but at the same time is bigger and of a different nature than that of the capitalist economy. A Zoöp is a place where this alternative logic can take root and develop. And we call this logic zoonomy. So this is proposed as a kind of alternative to the logic of the capitalist economy that brought us to the brink of total destruction, as I'm sure you're all aware. So in a certain way, Zoöp is a pragmatic answer to that metaphysical issue that Mark Fisher beautifully formulated, but he was quoting Frederick James. It's easier to see the end of the world than the end of capitalism. So the Zoöp model is the centerpiece to the Zoöp movement and the anchor point for the practice of zoonomy. It's inspired by 3 by now very famous cases. First of all, Wanganui River, Te Urewera Forest, and Mount Taranaki. And these are 3 collective more than human bodies that are living ancestors to different New Zealand iwi, so different Maori peoples, Maori nations. And these collective more than human bodies were granted legal personhood under the New Zealand jurisdiction in the last few years. So in a way, the New Zealand, actually Anglo-Saxon jurisdiction and the Maori culture found a kind of hybrid where Maori culture was able to express certain key elements in terms of the legal system, and the legal system was able to express Maori culture in terms of its own vocabulary. So they are now, these 3 collective more than human bodies are incorporated non-humans, and they're, whenever this is necessary, represented by human members of their respective iwi, so that act as guardians or protectors. Okay, switch to the Netherlands. This is where we found ourselves when we heard of these cases. We don't have collective more than human bodies of that kind of cultural standing. Maybe the Waddenzee. This is probably the only one of which we can really say it's on a par with Mount Taranaki and the others. But otherwise, we have stretches of land next to highways, degraded farmland, and some very recent forests, and the dunes. And in Dutch indigenous culture, non-humans are considered resources and certainly not subjects, let alone ancestors. In fact, probably the Dutch feel themselves more to be the ancestors of nature than the other way around. So, by initiative of het Nieuwe Instituut, a group of lawyers, artists, theorists, and designers worked out a way of translating key elements of this New Zealand cases into the Dutch/European cultural contracts and jurisdictions. And there's the difference between those jurisdictions here is no longer important. It used to be, but by now we have simplified it. So this is important. The Zoöp legal format does not require legislative reformation. It's different than granting legal personhood, which actually requires new laws to be written. But it works with existing legal instruments of private law that are innovatively treated and folded into each other, if I may say so, a rather clever way. So Zoöp does not grant rights or personhood, but works on the premise that non-humans already have these rights. And what is necessary is to work with those rights, to acknowledge them, and to form a practice around them. So we, in a way, skip the whole idea of having to grant rights, which in a way also functions as a reification of the position of humans as to be in the position of granting rights. But we cut it right to the chase. In a way that it's a shortcut in the rights to nature debate. So the design of the Zoöp model has three main goals. First of all, to strengthen, not in any hierarchy, actually they're all equally important, the position of non-human life within human societies, to support ecological regeneration, which we understand as quality of life for multi-species communities that include humans. And this is the field, the sphere that we name zoonomy. And it should be adoptable and actually implemented by a wide variety of organizations. Any organization should be able to become a Zoöp and to collaborate and to work on this extremely urgent work of ecological regeneration. And the term, if you didn't know this already, is a combination of the Greek word for life, zoe, which is basically the very metaphysical idea of life. It's everything that's not dead is zoe, and cooperation. So it's not the zoo of it's not, it has no link to the, it has a link actually, but it's not like refers to a dierentuin, to a zoo. Zoo uses the word of zoe in the false way because it's actually only about animals, and zoe actually covers the whole of life. So an organization transforms into a Zoöp by including in its board, in its executive board, a seat for the so-called Zoonomic Foundation. This has this particular task, and only this task, to articulate and represent the interests of non-human life within the spatial and operational sphere of the organization that becomes the Zoöp. So this is this representation that is also organized in the New Zealand case, but then translated to a Dutch jurisdiction. It's actually a foundation, and a foundation is bound by law to stick to its own articles of association. So this is the only thing it's allowed to do, to articulate and represent the interests of the non-human community. So what is the specific, let's say, extra ability that you are organized by granting humans this position of the Zoonomic Foundation is that they can act as speculative and political organs to this non-human community. And humans tend to be a little bit better at specifically these tasks. They can organize different possible futures next to each other and work on them. And they can, let's say, do the work of politics to make them real. So this is the model, basically. The Zoöp Institute, I have to do this with my mouse arm here. The Zoöp Institute is the knowledge base, the seat of exchange, and also the organization that grants the right to call yourself a Zoöp to Zoöps. Zoöps form a network, also among each other. That line is not drawn. And a Zoöp is an organization that in its executive board has this one seat reserved for the Zoonomic Foundation. That's basically it. So by becoming a Zoöp, an organization keeps its existing goals, but adds to them a new goal. And that is that the goal to develop its situated zoonomy, or quality of life for a whole non-human community, which includes humans. So in a way, in other words, you could say the practice of zoonomy is the effort to improve the health of the collective body of a Zoöp. So there's a whole process to it that I'm not going to explain right now. This is the topic of the curriculum that starts tomorrow. But it's basically 4 movements that every Zoöp goes through in a yearly rhythm, starting with demarcating, like who belongs to it, who are our constituents. This is the only thing you have to do once. All the other things you have to do every year. Observing and sensing, who live here, how do they relate to each other. Characterizing, how do they see and support each other, or how do they obstruct each other. And then intervening, improving the general condition by implementing spatial or operational changes. And this is quite a long game. Every time you've done interventions and new things came up, you can go through this again. And your goals may move every year. It starts with the very material and practice and purely ecological conditions, and it may move up to your operational sphere, your clients, your suppliers, etc., etc. It requires that the knowledge practices that constitute the different fields that are all kind of represented in zoonomy, namely ecology, organizational management, artistic research, economy, etc., philosophy, are actually open up to each other and form a kind of shared language. And zoonomy, as this new term, is actually a start in developing this language. So these are current protozoops. I'm not going to list them. You can either 4 of them are represented here. And in the course of the next few weeks, we'll visit a couple more in the phases of the curriculum. And I want to close up with what we see. This is my last slide. What we see as the kind of the real, well, the promise of the Zoöp, the potential, the reason to actually want this. It embeds ecological regeneration in the heart of an organization, so it can have enormous impact. It's very immediate because we don't need any change of law. We don't have to wait for the official possibility of legal personhood. Zoöps can start right away. They give agency to any organization that wants to act, so it's also quite empowering. You don't have to wait. It channels your restless energy and your extreme worry. You are able to become a Zoöp, and then you can start this work. It transforms complex concepts into actionable practices, so it's quite pragmatic. It should be applicable to all kinds of organizations, small, large, non-profit, for-profit, so it's quite open. It is also open to different governance models. Anything that has a board can become a Zoöp by including in that board a seat for the Zoonomics Foundation. It also, and last but not least, this also makes it quite flexible to travel to other jurisdictions, because also the idea of organizations with boards basically exist in all jurisdictions in the world. So it's quite adaptable to different international situations. So if you want to know more, this is a URL, Zoöp at het Nieuwe Instituut, where you can also register to our newsletter. And the images, the beautiful images you saw were by Patricia de Ruiter. That's me. So I'm going to stop sharing now. It was 10 minutes, a little bit longer than the 7 I promised. Very sorry about that. That's because of that last slide. This was new. I've not included that in my presentations before. But what we're going to do now is have 4 protozoops present their own practice in short presentations. And after that, we'll have a conversation about the potentials and the actual issues and how those potentials can be used to approach those issues, and how basically, practically it works, how it practically works to do a Zoöp. So first of all, I want to introduce you to Anne van Leeuwen, who studied art history, cultural analysis and biology. She is co-initiator of the regenerative farm Bodemzicht, just outside Nijmegen. She's also one of the directors of the Embassy of the North Sea, which addresses different issues of the same practice, actually. But the farm Bodemzicht aims to provide a realistic circular alternative to agriculture and create a long-term future for farmers in the Netherlands. Anne van Leeuwen.
Thanks, Klaas. Yes. All right. I'm also going to share my screen with you. I'm going to take you on a 10-minute journey of my protozoop. So here you go. Full screen. Yes.
Yes.
All right. So I want to tell you actually why we want to become a Zoop, why we're motivated as a regenerative farm. So we started, just want to start shortly with the current situation in which we live, a very split nature culture, divided world. You can still see many examples for that. For example, this is the bridge that goes from the city of Nijmegen to the Ooipolder, and there you have this beautiful sign that says "Welcome in the nature." Well, at the other side of the bridge, you won't find a sign that says "Welcome in the culture." We would find it very weird because that's supposed to be specific in Nijmegen and historically situated, etc. So in our world, nature still somehow doesn't have an agency, and we live in a very schizophrenic reality. But then we are sort of overhauled by this reality of the Anthropocene, in which everything is complex and entangled, and in which non-humans have become very active actors. Think of ice sheets that are now forming our coastlines, microbes that are influencing my mood, or insects that are actually co-producing our agricultural production. So they should be full-fledged members of society, plants, animals, microbes, things. Because we cannot deal, I really think we cannot deal with the challenges that we face, like climate crisis, biodiversity loss, and social inequality, if we do not include non-humans as full-fledged members, if we not take them into account. So how does that translate into organizations? Then becomes the question. Yes, here an example of complex entanglement. This is a Joost Janmaat as an earthworm at our farm. A small intermezzo. And another thing I stumbled up on recently is the beautiful movement of regeneration. This is an example of the Loess Plateau in China that was regenerated. So you see before and after with an in-between period of 25 years. It was filmed by the Chinese-American filmmaker John D. Liu in the documentary Green Gold. And it's a beautiful example for me. It was one of the first references in which I could see that human beings could actually be a beneficial part of the ecosystem. Because the story that I grew up with is that we can only be degrading. And then the context of sustainability tells you that what you can do is become less degrading if you really try hard, and perhaps zero emission, but that you can actually be beneficial. That's a reference, a story, and an image of the human being that I didn't have. So to combine these two interests, you could say, of overcoming this nature-culture divide and dealing with the complexity of the ecological reality we are living in now, and the beneficial image of the human being as a regenerative being, that sort of came together for me in the Zoöp. And here you can see we are in a Zoöp meeting before Corona started. And to actually see, okay, how can we literally positively incorporate the human into organization models in which non-humans also actually get a voice. So how can we build beneficial multi-species communities that Klaas calls the zoonomy? So this translated into our farm, of course, as well. So Bodemzicht is a regenerative farm and learning place with our mission, our core mission is to facilitate life. We do this, for example, by having a no-dig market garden. No-dig, so we don't plow, we don't schoffelen, we don't spray. And we're actually farming in collaboration with mycelium. We're actually feeding soil life and they are feeding our plants. Regeneratively, you could say, is that you always strive for ecological, social, and economic win-win-win situations. It should always be an and neither an either-or, because then something is still being exploited. One other thing we're doing is holistic grazing. So this is a way also of trying to manage complexity. We move our with chicken mobiles, we move our chicken in a way so that we actually stimulate the building of topsoil. So it all starts from the soil and the quality of soil life. And already you could say we see a lot of benefits. So this was the first summer we were there. This is Bodemzicht in 2019, April, and this is Bodemzicht, April 2021. So you can already see the life returning and also the soil recovering. And Bodemzicht is also a learning place. So we are addressing the question how to build a regenerative society. And specifically within that line, so we're also looking at regenerative economies, politics, healthcare, what could it look like? But specifically, we're also propagating regenerative farmers because we need many more of those. And the Zoöp and the ideas of the Zoöp are very much connected and aligned to these ideas of bodemzicht, to create a human inclusive ecosystem and an organizational model that actually fits the complexities that we're facing today and the challenges. So what are the benefits for me of becoming a Zoöp? Well, I think there are 4 main ones, but we can speak more about it later. First of all, I think the Zoöp really addresses the root cause and not the symptoms, which for me is a very important reason to find this initiative very attractive, because I see a lot of symptomatic approaches to the challenges we're facing. Fundamental because it exactly addresses this nature-culture divide. And in my case, when it comes to agriculture, it's a nature-agriculture divide that is very strongly there. So, for example, one thing we can speak about is that I legally will have issues with introducing high quality biodiversity at the farm, because if I get red list species at my farm, I am at the risk of becoming nature and losing my ability to farm. So there you have a very beautiful example of how problematic it still is to create this kind of more than human communities in a beneficial way. The second one is a mission and vision point. It is very much aligned with our own mission to facilitate life. And it will help us to actually also secure our goals, even when it's not related to me or my partner, Ricardo and Matteo, who I'm farming with. So it really brings your goals on the inside, and it ensures sort of that it's not just green talk. Thirdly, I think it creates this critical body, because you get this community of Zoöps who keep each other sharp and in check, but they also strengthen the voice of this more inclusive model by creating some kind of lobby, you could say, to really address what kinds of governance, what kind of policies, rules, regulations, what kind of zoning plans we need to be able to start to regenerate on this scale. And I will say validation is also a very important reason for me to want to become a Zoöp. Validation not only as a checking body to see that I'm actually growing life, that I'm growing a more qualitative community, but also in terms of measurements. I think it could be really innovative to start to really try to find instruments, way and methods to measure not only quantities, what we're doing now, we're collecting a lot of quantitative data, but also the quality of life and the quality of a community, and how can we actually start measuring that. So, and in that way, I hope that the Zoöp will also become a way of, it will help to start to ask different scientific questions. So these are my 4 reasons, and love to speak more about it later.
Wow, thank you, Anna. That's some extremely compelling arguments you list there. Thank you very much. We'll have the ability to talk also about certain issues you already addressed at the end of the 4 presentations. So I'm gonna give the screen now to the next speaker, who is Jane Damosto from Venice. Jane Damosto is an environmental scientist, a consultant, a plant ecologist, and a consultant on sustainable development, climate change and wetland ecology. And she's co-founder of We Are Here Venice, an NGO that specializes in using academic research and methodologies to characterize the challenges for Venice, which are severe, but not entirely hopeless, in the words of Jane Damosto. Jane.
Hello, everybody. You can hear me okay?
Yes, clearly.
Well, it's a real honor to be joining you again and to be hosted by Het Nieuwe Institute. And I want to just quickly finish describing We Are Here Venice as a small transdisciplinary group of activists, but we're connected to a very large network of local international universities, businesses, cultural institutions, and public authorities. Our approach is very practical and pragmatic, just like the Zoöp system or philosophy, what I don't know what to call it. And the rigorous research is always directed at specific real changes that we measure for now, we haven't found anything better than the social, economic, physical, and ecological indicators of the UN Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. But I'm with Anne in wanting to get more quality more than quantity in looking at what we do and where we go. Our mission is to protect the future of Venice. In other words, to ensure that this place remains a living city. It needs to host a diversity of productive activities, jobs, housing for all kinds of families with different professions, lifestyles, and levels of income, as well as the necessary community services, environmental quality, entertainment, culture. And we, as you'll all have heard about Venice, it's been a while now. Whenever I meet somebody and I say, oh, I come from Venice, with a big smile on my face, they say, oh God, do you really live there with all those tourists, with those ships, with all these things? And of course, tourism has to be part of the equation, but it cannot remain the raison d'etre for all of this richness and wealth. So basically, we're advocating for balance, which encompasses, most of all, our relationship with the lagoon. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this view of Venice, and it really sums up how the protection of the lagoon is essential for the health of the city. We see the city and the lagoon as inseparable elements of a single system. Our projects in various ways address this, the environmental and as well as the very physical challenges like water level issues, ecosystem restoration, and the bringing to light the importance of the salt marsh, which here in Venice is called the Barena, which represents the very specific ecology of the salt marsh that we have here due to the tidal system, despite this being in the Mediterranean. The lagoon is 550 kilometers squared. Only 1/6 of it is salt marsh, which is, the amount of salt marsh is 1/6 compared to 5 centuries ago, when the big rivers that used to feed into the lagoon were rerouted to stop the lagoon from filling in with sediment. I'm going into these details because I think in Holland you're interested in these things. The average water depth in the lagoon has more than doubled since the 1960s, which is when a navigation channel was dredged here. You can see my mouse going like this. So this big watery highway was cut across the lagoon. And the area I'm going to be talking about today is up here, because down here, all the salt marsh has been washed away. And that needs to be addressed. So there's no real reference state for the lagoon. It's just this mixture of dynamic processes influenced by human actions. And our work highlights the importance of this interplay, but we're constantly coming up against issues of governance. There's the whole lagoon is overseen by the Ministry for Public Works. The port obviously has a strong role in what happens due to the navigation channel and the port activities here in Marghera. There's intense tourism that includes at one end of the spectrum the cruise ships. So Venice is institutionally, politically, and I must add psychologically very complex. The economic aspects aren't very simple either. The short-term gains from mass tourism come at the cost of environmental destruction. And our thesis is that protection of the lagoon produces the ecosystem services that have a series of direct economic values, like fishing, water treatment, carbon sequestration, and the less direct ones like biodiversity protection. These are all these ecosystem services are kind of, I think of them as being almost at the other extreme of the Zoöp approach. And I was in the midst of completing an economic valuation of the ecosystem services of the Venice Lagoon when I was lucky enough to get introduced to Caroline Nevejan, and through her to class as part of the Exploratorium Values for Survival, which is the parallel program of the Dutch contribution to the Venice Architecture Biennale, which will be opening soon. And I've done the ecosystem services work with Laura Onofri, who's a environmental economist at the University of Padua. And it was just very interesting to see how far we can go with the Zoöp approach. It was within the limits of the lockdown circumstances a year ago. And the only thing I could do was observe and articulate the issues, starting with the tiniest area of salt marsh here in the northern lagoon. The area I'm talking about is right here. So here you can see the island of, where's Burano? You can't, anyway, it's over to the side, Torcello. Anyway, if you've been to Torcello or Burano or Mazzorbo, this is the area of the lagoon that we're operating in. The first stage, this is where I was sitting, and just over the end of that wooden platform is the area of salt marsh that I decided to focus on to, maybe I haven't been clear. I focused on this tiny little area, but the vision for We're Here Venice is kind of different from the other proto-zoops, because we'd like to one day apply the zoop to a whole system of governance for the Venice Lagoon. So We Are Here Venice has absolutely no authority to decide how the lagoon is administered. But as advocates, maybe we can introduce this approach to the public agency that is in charge of the lagoon. That's all we can, that's the best we can offer. But unless we understand what we're doing, we're not going to be very good advocates. So I started with these 30 square meters right here at the end of this terrace. And that's kind of what it looked like a year ago, a bit later in the year. These pictures were probably taken in June, just in time to go in the catalogue that I don't know if, which you can find on Het Nouveau Institute website of the whole Exploratorium program. And I went through all the demarcation, observing, sensing, characterizing stages of the Zoöp process. And I just want to signal in your heads for the discussion that defining the area and establishing a system for governance is just the beginning of the whole long, complicated process when you're going to decide where to make space for the twigs and where to let the plants grow longer. And here you can see it all under high tide, and we hope that won't get too much higher too fast. Finished.
Thank you, Jane. Fantastic. It's we get a chance to talk about this the difference also between you being a kind of a grassroots, also an activist organization that wants to address this on a larger scale than the actual only location. I think this is, to be honest, I think this is actually one of the key potentials also of a Zoöp, and that it not only addresses its own space, but actually kind of tells the story outwardly. But we'll get a chance to talk about this. I want to introduce you to our next speaker. We keep the pace. The next speaker is Roberta Jurcic. Sorry, where is my bio? Here, Roberta Jurcic, who works as an architect in the Brandelhuber office in Berlin and teaches at the design studio Brandelhuber at the ETH in Zurich. together with Design to the Brandelhoeper Plus, she works on reworking the future of the building known as the Mäusebunker in Berlin, which is a former animal testing laboratory in Berlin. I'll leave it at that, and I'll give you the opportunity to address its transformation.
Thank you.
Roberta.
Thank you, Klaas, for introduction. You can see in my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I'm Roberta, and I will show you a small presentation about the Mäusebunker that we are currently working with the students, but hopefully it will also become a real project. Tonight I will speak on the behalf of the whole teaching team that includes Anno Brandelhuber, Severin Barenbold, Marta Fernandez, Iris Hilton, Olaf Gravet, Christian Poshofen, Christopher Roth, and me. And we are running a TV station, Station Plus, where you can see more about our design studio. And this semester, for the third time in a row, we are exploring the topic of cohabitation of the humans and the non-humans. And this time as the study case, in a way, we chose the former testing laboratory in Berlin. It's called Mäusebunker. And since the studio is working with the medium of film, I will play a short trailer that should explain a little bit our intentions. So as mentioned in the trailer, we invited different people from different fields to join us as the future users of the Mäusebunker, amongst others, Klaas. And this is somehow how the story of Mäusebunker becoming a Zoöp started. I will now go shortly through the building just to get the idea. So a little bit of history. The Mäusebunker or Zentrale Tierlaboratorium was designed by Gerd and Magdalena Henska in 1971, and the construction was completed in 1980s. It was used as an animal testing laboratory for Free University of Berlin, which is since 2000 grouped together with Charité, and Charité is one of the Europe's largest university hospitals. Since 2010, the jobs gradually started to be outsourced from the building, and the parts of the building started to be closed, mainly because of need of modernization of the building, and also building was contaminated by asbestos. And since 2010, Charité planned the demolition of the existing building, and the new building was planned for 2020. Since the building, it's a very nice example of German post-war architecture, and many people thought it should be protected as a heritage. There was a fight against its demolition, and in 2020 there was a petition It was in a form of open letter that was sent to the mayor, the Senate, to the Heritage Department, and finally demolition was postponed. And since the building is very expensive to maintain, kind of the policy was like that the city will not keep the building unless there is valid use for the building, since kind of the citizen tax is going to maintain it. In 2020, Arno Brandelhuber, together with Johann König, they sent a letter to the board of Charité and to all the people that were previously mentioned that they want to take over the building. And how it seems for now, and the political situation that is, hopefully it will be taken over and preserved by the end of this year. A little bit of Mäusebunker as the symbol. It has a lot of connotations. For instance, you can see in this example, it's always perceived as this massive brutalist building, but we can see on this photo from the, while it was built, that it was actually a skeleton structure, and this in this form of Plattenbau was just attached to it. So it's not such a massive building. And then the main symbol is, of course, for this animal testing that was happening inside. And this is why we found it interesting to take it as a building where we will test the cohabitation. And this is also why it's interesting for the Zoöp as a movement. Now I will go through the article that was published in the magazine Geo in 1984. So you can see a little bit how the building was used. Now the building is not used anymore, and the last animal left the building in 2020. And this is the condition while it was still in use. And now I will move to the Mäusebunker as a building. It's located in the southern western part of Berlin in the borough of Steglitz. It is part of an assembly of the buildings. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but on the upper side there is a Hygiene Institute, which is already protected. And here is the Lichterfelde Park, which is under the natural protection law. The building itself, it's rather big. It has 30,000 square meters of usable area and 2.2 hectares of plot around it. In the section, we can see that there were alternating floors between the laboratory floors and technical floors, which have been used for mechanical ventilation of the building, since the building was completely sealed from the surrounding. Due to the high hygienic standards, everything needed to be zero bacteria, nothing could enter in. And here are some photos from the interior, and different colors represent different levels of sterility of the building itself. And now I'll move to the final part, Mäusebunker becoming part of the Zoöp. As you can see, our project is in the very beginning, and but we think that the values behind them are very much aligned with the values of the Zoöp, and this is why we think it's an amazing opportunity to include the Zoöp in the very beginning of the start of the project. As I mentioned previously, we have different users who are part of the projects, and they all have these ideas as their core. And we plan to kind of together organize a form of Stiftung or Verein organization in order to become a Zoöp. And we will work with the existing structure where it's very important to incorporate right program, and this program shares the same values, and therefore, like for instance, we have Baubotanik, they are working with the living structures, or for instance, animal aided design, they are incorporating occurrence of animals as a part of the urban environment. Currently, we are in the middle of the semester, and this is like a list from a few weeks ago where students try to come up with a certain rules that require them to take into consideration how the non-humans feel, or yes, to kind of find a mutual voice. This is one of the conceptual diagrams where they try to include or incorporate the clients together with the non-humans. And we were observing the current conditions of the site and mapping them to get the understanding who are the other non-humans around us. And I will finish with a little video that one of the students of ours installed this night vision camera to capture what is happening. And there is a fox next to the Mäusebunker. Yes, this is all from me.
Thank you, Bertha. Beautiful. Indeed, yeah, an iconic transformation. So, but more on that after our last speaker, Matthijs ten Berge. As I said, we're keeping the pace. Matthijs ten Berge, where's my page with bios? Excuse me here. Matthijs ten Berge, co-founder of Sumowala. You will explain where the title comes from. But Sumowala is a regenerative nature recreation company started by Space and Matter, architectural firm Space and Matter, and the Ground Force Studio, of which you are also initiator. And Ground Force Studio develops digital and physical platforms that support public common values and generate positive impact. And you're also involved, and this is also very interesting from the perspective of the Zoöp idea, you're also involved in the DEAL, the Donut Economics Action Lab of Kate Raworth, kind of developing the practices that would make the donut economy model of Kate Raworth actionable in the context of Amsterdam. But you're here to talk more about Sumowala, but I do think it's of vital importance that it ties in with this alternative idea about economy that I also addressed in the very beginning. So
Yes.
take it away, Matthijs. Yeah.
Thanks, Klaas. Let me share my screen. Here we go. So thank you very much, Klaas. Yeah, to start with DEAL, we are, to make it a little bit more specific, is we are involved in creating the platform of Donut Economics Action Lab. So if you go to donuteconomics.org, we created for and with the Oxford team the platform, and one of the other founders of Sumowala, Ruur Pister, is quite or very closely together with Kate in her methodologies. I'm here now alone, but of course I'm not alone in Sumowala. One of my other partners in crime and also founders, Ernestine Idenburg, is also present. So I hope I'm also talking on her behalf. And of course, there are also other very important partners, Sasha Glassel of Space and Matter, now of Sumowala now, and Desiree Leijs are of my partners. I start off my short 8-minute talk, I hope, with a human, with a non-human. Because that is a starting point, at least for me, but also for the Sumowala company that we founded last week. So we are new kid on the block. I'm going to present you our thoughts and idea and our plan. But the little guy you see here in the midst of the picture is my 11-year-old son, who was playing in the world famous in Amsterdam nature playground called het Woeste Westen, and he was there taking part in the adventure club, and which was 1 hour a week playing in a small snippet of nature in the west of Amsterdam. And a few moments after I took this picture, he ran up to me and he said, and I said in Dutch first, "Papa, ik ben nog nooit zo gelukkig geweest," which means in English, that I've never been so happy in my life, which was of course something that touched me. So what I did as a concept developer, schooled as an urban planner, I started to draw with him about what made him so happy. And it was so simple that it was almost shocking. He experienced the sun, but he also liked to look at the moon in the evening, playing with water, playing with land. So we basically started first together on a journey to create a fictional landscape of our dreams, and we called it Sumowala, which is the abbreviation of Sun, Moon, Waterland. And then because this concept development is my job and it's what I do, together with Space and Matter, Sasha, Ernestine, Desiree, and Ruurt, we started to actually draw up a plan to to create a company in which we could use these kind of ideas to regenerate parts of, as a starting point, our country, the Netherlands, and to use degraded land, agricultural land, to create new nature. So that is what the purpose of Somawala is, as Klaas so rightly said, to set up a company for literally recreation. And this is very urgent because in the Netherlands, and of course we have European ambitions, but let's start with the Netherlands first, only 4% of our soil is open for public, for recreational use. We have approximately 12% nature, more than 60% agriculture. So in these Corona times, we are all, we don't have a lot of space, let's say that at least. So what we are planning to do, and some of my sheets are in Dutch, I'll go over them very quickly, is to find a solution in which nature development and recreation go hand in hand, because everything, at least in the Netherlands, is split up in parts, not communicating parts, also politically not communicating. So what we are looking at is trying to set up a system which this nature development and recreation go hand in hand and can actually help each other, so that we create new nature, or let nature recreate itself, of course, but we set the conditions, and then also for humans, us, to be able to experience that new nature. So we're not looking at new nature parks that you cannot enter. We are looking for nature parks in which we can actually use. So what we're doing, and we are at the moment working on our first location that we hope to sign up within a few months, is that we buy approximately 20 hectares of agricultural land, and we set the conditions for nature to restore itself. And we open up the whole space, which previously had been closed off for public, because this green desert is not only green desert, but of course, let's say that part of it is a green desert, is closed off for people to use. We open it up in a new nature park, and 5% of the land we use to set up, to create small eco cabins that you can rent and buy and share. Let's say, and of course, at the moment we are working on these cabins. We're working very closely together with Bureau Stroming, which works closely together in the Netherlands with Wereld Natuurfonds, World Nature Fund, in trying to see what the system should be and how we can actually create these conditions. These settlements are, of course, 100% circular. We are developing a platform for knowledge sharing, but also for the local community to actually benefit also economically from a Somawala settlement. Very important to state that we don't add any other functions than the eco cabins itself. So we're not going to fall into the trap that we're going to add a restaurant or a supermarket, etc. Everything needs to be helping a local agricultural community to facilitate that if they want. So it's a very pure and bare kind of settlement. Sorry about this. I just realized this. What we're doing, the benefits of the Somawala model are that we are going to use the space more multifunctional. We try to be part of the solution for a big nitrogen crisis that we have in the Netherlands at the moment, which is completely halting all development. It's a big political problem. We try to add a business model for nature development, in which we can be sometimes a missing link in the whole regeneration process of a larger area. And we want to create a scalable model for nature recreation. What we feel is that a lot of people, especially within cities, at least in the Netherlands, but we expect also in larger parts of Europe, are looking for a real wild nature experience close to their houses, within an hour of your house. So our subtitle is Binnen een uur in de natuur, so it's within an hour in nature. And we expected a lot of people, and we also did, of course, our market research, but that a lot of people wanted. So it's a scalable model of these Sumawala settlements. This is a lot of text. I know this is just an example that we are actually looking in ways to put the Sumawala model into the donut. So this is something that if you want, I can share, because we did the exercise how we can put our business model. This is largely the work of Ernestine in Day to Day. To see how we can connect the business model within the donut model, which is a very interesting exercise. Per Sumawala settlement, I'm almost at the end of my time. We're of course going to create a lot of on a lot of different metrics impact. So each Sumawala settlement, and I'll try to translate, is 27 pitches, football pitches of new nature per settlement. We're looking at new jobs for local community, 3 per Sumawala. Well, the rest it will speak for itself. This I will skip. This is who we are, what we have done before. Space and Matter has created a few very well-known examples in Amsterdam. We've created some really nice networks within the city of Amsterdam that I will skip. These are my dear colleagues. Well, I will end because my time is up with the benefits of the Zoöp model, because the Zoöp idea came quite late in our development process, but at the other end, it came just in time because we were setting up our legal structure and everything was still very pristine. It was still open, and we could use it to actually put it in the legal structure. So I think for us, it gave us a very clear and simple solution for a very complicated puzzle that we had to lay. I think it's a safeguard for when we are going to spread. I'll try to avoid the term growth because we're not, but we want to spread the Sumawalas all over the place, of course, and we will need a lot of financing for that. So putting this in our legal structure means that we can never cross the line that it's hurting non-humans, because it's just part of our system. Thirdly, I think it gives us also a competitive advantage, because if we really have this as a part of our business structure, then I hope others will do it as well. But at least we have done it. So it's also something that we can tell the world. And of course, we want to join the recreation movement. So that's something for us very important. We want to help out, and we want to be a party that specifically from staying in nature, sleeping in nature, creates basically your new nature. So that's it, Klaas.
Thank you, Matthijs. Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you all for your fantastic, concise, and also extremely encouraging. I mean, of course, I'm saying this on behalf of the Zoöp project as a whole, but it's really fantastic to see how you are making this real also. And to me, this is also in a way the first time that I see this. I mean, so far I've been talking to you. This is the first time in a way you're talking back. So it's I'm very impressed. Of course, like what we all see now is very. It looks like we can do this. This is all like, okay, it's all downhill from here. Of course, it isn't. And I would like not want to leave you, the audience, with the feeling that we found the solution and now this is what we're going to do and we'll all be happy ever after. This would be great. And let's say, definitely the intention is that we make this as real as possible and we give this kind of very concrete, practical anchor to do this work of repair. But it's not as easy as it may seem. And this is also what I would like to talk about. What are the issues? But I would also like to talk about what we've identified as maybe 4 key qualities of the Zoöp project. And I would like to say the regenerative approach that Anna van Leeuwen already embodies. The grassroots movement and the idea that you can influence public opinion that Jane Damosto has as her key practice, combined with, of course, using very specific scientific knowledge. The iconic kind of transformation of of a discipline that is traditionally basically about protecting humans from their elements, but is now kind of reinventing itself in the case of the Moisebunker. This narrative transformation, and of course, an actual economic value, let's say, an economically valid way of doing this also. Something that also means that, let's say, we can take the extremely destructive elements out of capitalism and still do economy, which would be good news, because we do need, let's say, material exchange. We cannot cut away all of that. This would also be naive. So we have to find a way out that allows to work with what's there. So, but let me ask you, what do you see as what are the issues that you're facing? I would like to draw some parallels also, and there's a couple of people in the audience that I would like to ask for responses also to those issues. Oh yeah, before we start, in the pictures you've also heard the names of Ernestine Idenburg. In a picture of Anna was also Vincent Koorstra, who have been central to the development of the Zoöp practice. So I would like to kind of single out their names for a moment. And invisible to you, but also extremely important to the whole Zoöp project is Wietske Nutma, who's moderating the chat. And she's doing key work. So thank you, Wietske, also. Okay, but back to the problems. So maybe in the order of appearance, Anna, can you say, like, what are the things that you've addressed some of them already? What are you facing, and what do you see as let's say, a thing for Zoöp also to tackle there?
Yes, well, there are many things we're facing because we're a small integrated farm. Like, we try to integrate as much as possible. And that's exactly where the challenge comes in, because most policy and rules regulations are very sectoral and mainly written for large-scale industrial farming. Mm-hmm. And I think really one of the most fundamental things we're facing is this split between nature and agriculture. And I completely understand where it comes from, but it's very challenging to work with. Like, one of our most fundamental challenges, for example, that in zoning plans you cannot live at the farm, while in our way of farming we have to be there almost 24/7. You're constantly observing. You're very grounded. So that's a problem. Like, that's a split, but the most fundamental split that I already addressed very shortly in my presentation is that we are actually struggling. That our main mission is to facilitate life, but it turns out that it could also be our biggest risk, and I'm still not entirely sure how it works. But the moment when we get these red list species on our terrain, and it's already happening, and I'm super happy that they're coming in, that moment
already now, that's like, so 1.5 year you've already made it to, let's say,
also think because we are surrounded by a beautiful area, so it's just if you facilitate it will happen, and in that way it's also not that difficult, I would say, to really make a difference. But the problem is that as soon as these species sort of enter our biosphere, we have, I think, the risk of becoming nature, and becoming nature now means human exclusive. So that could mean, okay, there you have this kind of fantastic newt or this rare breeding bird species, and they might lock it down and put a gate around and say, okay, nature. So that is challenging.
But this is, like, in your own words, this is actually a symptom. This is a symptom of that division, and it's
sort of a logical consequence of the way we are structuring our world.
Roberta, could you say something about how, because traditionally architecture is kind of is instrumental in this separation of humans from nature. That's almost let's say the key of the practice. It's to separate from the elements. But your proposal and the general practice of cohabitation kind of completely reverses that. But how is that kind of met in I mean, how is it received among students? How is it received among maybe established architects? Because this is a bit of a, I would say, a bit of a transition.
Yeah, I think that the idea of, let's say, multi-species cohabitation, it's kind of getting bigger, and you can see in different studios that more and more chairs are also tackling the same problems, and this is of course with the rising awareness of the global warming and just the current conditions that we are living in. So the whole topic is getting more interesting, and but I think the main problem or the big challenge is how to bridge this academic part with the practice, because in academia the shift is happening and we can talk about it, and yeah, the problem is kind of how to translate this into the actual architectural office, because there is still this big thinking of architects are just designers and they kind of turn the blind eye of what's happening around them. You know, what are the consequences of that?
And are there also this, let's say, financially, the whole practice, of course, is not organized around the idea of cohabitation. So do you face also similar issues? Do you think these are issues, the kind of things that Anne meets, that, let's say, the definitions in which you can work do not apply to your practice?
I think the Mäusebunker is very specific project, so it's like not the regular one, or I don't think it could be applied on every other building. So this is very specific, and therefore we are very lucky. And I think that we are not really facing similar projects to the others. Okay,
but that raises another question. But we'll get to that later, I hope. Jane, how is this? Because you've addressed this a little bit, but I would like you to maybe explain, because I think it ties in exactly with this question, to how to explain that. Because you started about ecological services, and then you said you became acquainted with the Zoöp model, and then something happened. But then what happened to the ecological services? So how could you say something about this?
Yeah, we're just trying everything, because it's like, you know, if you throw like some stones in the air, some might land in the right place. I don't know. So we're in this incredibly isolating situation where for many decades, you know, the glory of Venice comes from the symbiosis between the lagoon system and the living population. I mean, the palaces wouldn't have their wonderful architecture if they weren't built by taking into consideration that the context and the environment. But during the industrial era, there's been a completely different approach to the urban planning, the economic development of the city. And so we're just trying different ways to see how to get the lagoon back onto the agenda. And our big challenge, which I think is your question, you know, what is the biggest challenge? It's trying to get ourselves listened to, because there's no reason why what we find out or what we think is right should be taken into consideration the way things are now. And so the ecosystem services is a very direct way, working together with economists. It's not actually that simple, but it's on more established, it's kind of got a slightly more established methodology. We can like boil it down to numbers, but of course we all know that it's not the numbers aren't really the issue. It's about other things almost except the numbers.
So do you think? So I think what you're saying is that, and Anna, actually, in a preparation talk, you already mentioned you had a particular thought about this idea of ecological services. And there's, of course, this is the way to talk to the economy. This is like make it translated into the language of the capitalist economy. That's the only way it kind of a conversation can be opened up. But there seems to be a particular risk, namely if you have a better business model, then sorry Barena, we have found another way to find more money. And this is exactly what happens in Venice, of course, with the short-term interest of the tourist industry, which in the short run bring in extremely much more income than the long-term slow development and the actual mutual development. But can you say something about how Zoöp kind of changed your idea, or if it did actually? Because I mean, yeah.
Well,
if it did, or what do you see as potential then for the Zoöp to offer an alternative to this narrative?
I see a potential, as you know more than anybody else. The amount of time I've been able to dedicate to this has been too limited. So
sure, yeah.
Formal public apology for.
No, don't go there. Yeah.
However, I think it needs a lot more work on the other side of setting up the legal framework. Just say one day I wake up and it's a beautiful day and the head of the Public Works Department says, okay, we're going to make the Northern Lagoon a Zoöp. How are we going to do it? And that's when the real troubles is going to start, because should it be Barena? Should it be mudflat? What's going to happen where we need to move a little bit of sediments because that's where the fishermen need to put their nets? Or
right.
So I just want to ring a loud bell for the whole ecological indicators and decision-making processes, because
I see.
Just like Anna with her farm, and also the hospitality developments, and all of these Zoöps, there's going to be situations where you're going to have to decide which form of life needs to predominate. It's not like a spontaneous equilibrium anywhere.
No, I see. So you're addressing the specific, let's say, extreme complexity of the dynamic system of Venice, of the salt marshes, that makes it.
It applies to all of us.
Yeah, but that's to some extent true. But like in Matthijs's case, like buying the land, like introducing some species and leaving it, will like do the work of regeneration almost on its own. But in Venice, I think the complexity is that the salt marsh and the city are fully mutually dependent. That the city is not even possible to exist without the salt marsh, because it's, and the other way around. Like the salt marsh itself is actually also the result of the human inhabitation of the lagoon. So the whole nature culture divide does not apply on the most fundamental level to Venice, although you're in the middle of it.
I don't know what let's ask Matthias what he's going to do the day he finds a swarm of wasps in the tree right next to where the people go swimming or something. What's he going to do?
Yeah, it's a good time to, but I would actually, so the thing I hoped you would say is that like Zoöp allows you to think about Venice and the salt marsh as one unit. So you don't have to defend the salt marsh independently because they're important, but because like a Zoöp is something that includes both the city and the lagoon. And this indeed, provides the opportunity for another kind of narrative than to prove that the salt marsh also has economic value. And it's a very, so then I was,
good point.
I should not be answering these questions myself. Sorry, I try to. I should stop talking here. No, let's go over to Matthijs. But so Matthijs, what are the issues you're facing? And indeed, this had the question of, and maybe some of you have an answer to that also. Like, how do you do that? Let's say, I think the issue you're addressing is how do you do that non-human representation? Like, are there particular non-humans more important than others? Or how do you face that? But first, Matthijs, and then maybe an answer to that other question.
So the WASP question, I'll mark it for...
No, the first question was the issue. Like, what issue do you expect? I mean, do you recognize the issue of Anna, for instance, that those the planning complications?
Yeah, I mean, that is. I mean, we are in the process of buying land. So there's one particular spot that with the model we can in the financing structure we can be a missing link or missing part of the puzzle financially, which means that a much larger area can be transformed to new nature, and we provide with the business model a part of it. So that is also strategically or tactically, those are the projects we are specifically looking for, because this whole rezoning planning issue will take years. And well, we have a lot of, I mean, we're in this for the long run, but also business-like. We need to move very quickly to the first locations. Otherwise, it's just a pair of slides and track record, and that's it. So planning-wise, this is a major question, and what we expect, but still we are not at the stage that we can talk from a concrete location, is that this combination of nature recreation, and I really love the term personally recreation, because it's so, in essence, it's so, at least in Dutch, I don't know how it is in other countries, but it sounds so old-fashioned. It's so something that you don't want, but the essence of the term I really like. But recreation and nature in the Netherlands are two different things. There are different politicians, different groups, and everybody is talking about a integral solution, and everybody wants it, and every policy document is talking about it. But when you're actually there, and that's not the reality. That's not. And of course, this is, I think, the work. And I think from Anna's project, it's really, of course, it's really hard what you're now going to encounter. But in essence, it's also really beautiful, because it's such a great example of what happens. Yeah, you actually have to do it.
Maybe this is a good moment to ask Ludo Groen, who I know is in the audience and who is has a position in the Raad voor de Leefomgeving. Maybe to give a comment on this, because this issue of in a way that we're addressing the same issue on different cultural levels, from the high kind of cultural narrative to the very concrete, down to the nitty-gritty planning, where Jane faces the separation of the city and the salt marsh as an issue, so you have to talk about them separately. Anna meets the actual issue of meeting red-listed species on land and then flipping suddenly of a definition. So it's again this separation. Roberta's in this also had a transformation of a discipline from a separation discipline into a cohabitation discipline, and Matthijs faces the same issue as Anna. But it's all about this, let's say, in a way, the vocabulary of planning that we deal with, that derived from this culture of separation of nature and culture. So how are the Ludo? How are the what are, let's say, the prospects of this changing actually? So and how does that work?
I think Matthijs already made a very good point, and about it was spot on what you were saying about policies. Are all talking about integral. Everything needs to be integral. With the kind of the realization or the kind of appliedness of this notion or concept is well, it's not there. It's not. So that's really up to people like you guys to really kind of experiment with that and to kind of set precedents for this. So I think that maybe that's the first thing to say, but also obviously the notion of the integral comes from a kind of protectionist attitude, right? So Anna was already mentioning before this idea that you understand also where the idea of kind of protection and the idea of nature comes from, the designation of nature as such, because obviously we were first in a kind of time in which it was rather important to kind of to protect things, right? So now we kind of move from this kind of half Earth to a kind of whole Earth idea, in which maybe the kind of integral is the new kind of holy grail. Well, indeed, the question is how to kind of really apply that within, let's say, planning and also execution of this. And in that context, I think it's interesting what's coming up right now in the Netherlands with the new Omgevingswet. So it's a kind of new, let's say, spatial planning act in which They try to get rid of the idea of the land use plan and the zoning plan, which will be replaced by omgevingsplannen. So it's more like an environmental plan. Obviously, it's like, well, it's potato. But the question obviously is, in what sense can you? Well, one of the things that they try to do with this new law is that you can no longer define a place can no longer be only defined as one function or one program. So there should be possibilities to designate also a spot, and obviously in the Netherlands, every square meter has a destination, right? So the opening the possibility to also designate this 1 square meter to multiple purposes, and I think if we manage to kind of to get there, and then so not just in terms of designating functions, but also in designating other types of regulation to a space, then I think then there is interesting things to explore. But again, for this to be explored, you need the examples first to happen, I guess, before you can see evidence.
So then actually we're very much at the right track. So the best thing we can do is continue, I think is what you're saying.
I think so, Klaas. Yeah.
I was hoping you're going to say that, but but it's okay. Yeah, we're almost at the end of our time also, but this does kind of relate to this fundamental cultural issue of the nature-culture divide, and so, but then we zoom out in a kind of, let's say, this is an issue that we can't tackle. Let's say it's at the same time, it's, let's say, the issue to which we also provide an alternative by doing this as a practice, rather than thinking, I'm not only saying this, as a lot of philosophers are doing right now, but actually providing a concrete anchor point for an alternative to this division. But I must say, I also see it, as you addressed, also see a risk that. Let's say the scarce nature that exists still in the Netherlands, if this all becomes possible to address it as a multifunctional site, and I'm talking particularly about the Netherlands, where they had this is also a risk. Then suddenly, of course I can start a farm in the middle of the waterleiding duinen, because the whole idea of nature we abandoned. So then we need to again to. I must say then I hope we can use the Zoöp model to safeguard these interests of non-humans also at the sites that move in these zones. Now I'm talking too much again. I would like to say, so there's two things, the practice of actually doing a Zoöp seems to be important, but I think this other bit, this wider cultural narrative, and I would like to kind of also refer back to Jane here. So that's not only let's say leading or setting a practice, but also kind of influencing public opinion, that being part of a larger movement. That's, let's say, the last question I would like to all of you, because it's in a way it's practice, part of all your practices. So to Anna, I'm going to first ask the question, and then I give you the opportunity to respond. So Anna does a lot of, you do a lot of excursions to your farm. You do a lot of demonstrations. There's a lot of audience that visits your farm. I would like to, how you see their role. What's the importance of them? In the same question to Matthijs, you're providing this beautiful 1 hour into nature experiences. But what about the people that will actually go there? Do you think they will? What's the narrative you would like them to carry home with them, rather than, let's say, have the beautiful holiday experience? Maybe the same question to Roberta. I know that Mäusebunker is a singular example. At the same time, because it's such an iconic example, it has the power of narrative. It's a fantastic story you can tell. So how do you see the potential of, let's say, confronting architects with Mäusebunker and redeveloping their practice? And then Jane, who in a way is the most experienced, because this is the core of what you do. You're at the grassroots movement. Do you see a potential to tell this other narrative and of a unison between the city and the salt marsh as a way to influence public opinion? maybe as an alternative to the ecological services, which only kind of conforms a certain idea of a public opinion. So to really alternate that. So that's my last question to you, and then I'll shut up. Yeah. Okay. Maybe Anne, maybe you'd like to start. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, there are a lot of people visiting Bodemzicht in tours, but also importantly, we're a learning place, so a lot of people coming from courses, but also we are directly marketing our products. So all our customers, the chefs with we are working, private customers, they all come to the farm, they know the place, and they see the different stages and developments of the farm. I think it's extremely important because I think, for one, it's the most transparent way in which I can farm. You can come by. I'm certified by customers. I think it's way more transparent than any certification process the supermarket can come up with. But also it offers this kind of thing which I think is very important, and that's also the social value, economic value, and ecological value. I always think regeneration should about and. It should never be either or. Otherwise, you're going to get again another compensation culture, or again another problematic divide. And I think by inviting people to the farm, show them that to replace, to reconnect to place is actually part of the regenerative movement. And I also think I can tell the story 1,000 times, but I think the grasses and the vegetables can tell the story much better. So to be in a place has an enormous strength for telling that story, that actually we can also be beneficial as human beings within an ecosystem, as being an actor within a complex system. And there is a way to deal with that complexity. And of course, we're also finding that out, and we don't have all the answers, but you can definitely see that and you can experience that, and it's an embodied experience. And that's why I think it's extremely important that people can also visit the farm.
Thanks. Who would like to go next?
I will try to be very short. I think I would just hope that the not only architects but like also the other people, that we just become aware of the privilege and how ignorant and privileged we are towards the other species, and just to take others into consideration and try to make certain changes. And I hope that more and more people will join into this dialogue, and that this will become kind of a new normal, whatever normal means, but just like a new ground for a conversation. Yeah.
And those others mainly being architects as well.
Architects as well.
Yeah. Thanks. Matthijs?
So yeah, the question was, what is the experience there? I mean, within Somawala, I want these people that are coming for a vacation to themselves experience this incredible power of regeneration. And they're coming back to the question of Jane. I want them to come up with their own question, what to do with the wasps, so that they think about it. I don't know the answer. I don't know what I will do.
Nice one, yeah.
What they take home is that they start to think about this fictitious split between nature and humans, which I think it's an illusion. And so that's what they're staying there for a weekend, but they will come home to their cities, and hopefully it will lead to a translation also to their other life. So that's what I would like them to take with them, if they want.
Jane?
I don't know how to answer it really well, but I do think the question of, in Venice, it's very complicated, fractious, fragmented, and I think that people a lot in the community, also the non-human species, we're just in a moment in time where people have lost their hopes for the future, and everybody's trying to just like squeeze the lemon and get ready to run if they need to. And it's also, living here like with the canary in the mine, also in terms of the climate crisis, yesterday and the day before and maybe today, now it's quite late and I'll be going home, there was like the water coming over the edges of the canals in some areas of Venice. And this isn't flooding caused by stronger winds, which is what normally causes flooding. It's the astronomical tide, which is just the regular tide working on top of the chronically rising average sea level that, you know, the level in the Adriatic Sea corresponds to the water level that we have here in the lagoon. So there are, the only way out of this is if we can work together. The salt marsh, the Barena, are instrumental. They won't protect Venice from, you know, dramatic floods, but they do attenuate the currents. They more salt marsh can take a centimeter or two off water level. And I had an argument with some researchers that we were working with. They say, well, it's just a couple of centimeters. But if you live in Venice, a couple of centimeters is the difference between having water here or here, you know. So, so I think that, like, the rigor of the Zoöp, if I can call it a framework, might help to reinforce the idea that we're in it, only all together can we get out of it.
I would like to leave it at that. That's a very beautiful summing up of the basic idea. Only all together can we come out of this. I'd like to thank you very much, all of you. Had a fantastic evening. I hope the audience did as well. If you want to know more, there's the website, Zoöp at het Nieuwe Instituut. There's also a newsletter to keep informed on the new developments. I want to thank the audience for being here. Wietske, I see Ernestine there, fantastic. Well, not everybody I will recognize. So this was it. Thank you very much. Hope to see you again soon. Have a good night. Nou,